Esther's bakery was the crown jewel of Abuja's culinary scene. Every morning before dawn, eager customers would queue outside Esther's Divine Delights, their faces pressed against the glass windows, waiting for the first batch of her legendary cakes and pastries. The aroma that came from her ovens was so intoxicating that it drew people from across the Federal Capital Territory. Her red velvet cakes were said to melt like silk on the tongue, her meat pies so perfectly seasoned that even the most discerning palates were left speechless. The young Nigerian woman had become a sensation overnight. Food bloggers called her a baking prodigy, wealthy politicians commissioned her for their elaborate parties, and young entrepreneurs looked up to her as the embodiment of the Nigerian dream. Her main branch on Wuse 2 was always packed, with customers sometimes waiting hours just to taste her creations. But behind Esther's radiant smile and the golden success of her bakery empire, something dark and sinister lurked, a secret that would make even her most devoted customers recoil in horror if they knew the true price of her meteoric rise. Some months ago, Esther had been nothing more than a poor, humble girl from the Catholic Church orphanage in Garki. She had grown up within those modest walls, where Sister Agnes, a kind-hearted Reverend sister, had taken care of the food for all the children. Esther had always gravitated toward the kitchen, drawn by the warmth and the wonderful smells that emanated from Sister Agnes's cooking. Sister Agnes had noticed Esther's passion early on. The young girl would linger in the kitchen long after meals, asking questions about ingredients, watching intently as Sister Agnes kneaded dough for the Sunday bread. Recognizing this spark, Sister Agnes had taken Esther under her wing, teaching her everything she knew about baking, from the basics of measuring flour to the intricate art of creating perfectly layered pastries. "Baking is like prayer, my child," Sister Agnes would often say, her gentle hands guiding Esther's as they worked the dough together. "You put your heart into it, and God does the rest." When Esther came of age and was ready to leave the orphanage to make her own way in the world, Sister Agnes had pressed her life savings into the young woman's hands, money she had been setting aside for years from her modest allowance. "Use this to enroll in a master-class baking course," Sister Agnes had whispered, tears in her eyes. "Follow your passion, my dear. The world needs your gift." Esther had taken Sister Agnes's advice to heart, enrolling in the most prestigious baking academy in Abuja. She threw herself into her studies with the fervor of someone who knew this was her only chance. Her dedication paid off, she graduated top of her class and was even awarded a small cash prize to help start her own business. But the reality of entrepreneurship was far harsher than anything the textbooks had prepared her for. The prize money, combined with Sister Agnes's savings, was barely enough to rent a tiny shop space in a less desirable part of Abuja and purchase basic equipment. To make her dream a reality, Esther had to borrow heavily from banks, signing loan agreements with interest rates that made her stomach churn. But she was young, hopeful, and convinced that her talent would quickly translate into success. The first months were devastating. Despite her exceptional skills and the quality of her products, customers walked past her small bakery without even glancing at the beautiful displays in her window. Day after day, she watched her freshly baked bread grow stale, her intricate pastries go unsold. Bills piled up like storm clouds, and the sweet smell of her baking began to feel like mockery. Sister Agnes visited regularly, always with words of encouragement and prayers. "God's timing is perfect, my child," she would say, holding Esther's trembling hands. "Don't give up on your passion over these little setbacks. Your breakthrough is coming." But encouragement couldn't pay bills. Debt collectors began appearing at her door with increasing frequency, their threats growing more menacing each visit. Loan sharks circled like vultures, reminding her that they would seize her bakery if she couldn't make her payments. Sleep became elusive as anxiety gnawed at her every waking moment. On one particularly devastating evening, after yet another day of poor sales, Esther was locking up her bakery when she noticed an old beggar sitting beside her shop. This was strange, beggars weren't typically allowed in this area, and she had never seen this man before. He was ancient, with weathered skin and clothes that looked like they hadn't been changed in months. His eyes, though, were what caught her attention, dark and penetrating, seeming to hold depths of knowledge that didn't match his appearance. "Just a tiny piece of cake, please," he said, stretching out his dirty palms toward her. Esther hesitated. She had been planning to take home the remaining pastries for her own meager dinner. But something about the old man's presence moved her, and despite her own desperate circumstances, she reached into her bag and pulled out a portion of cake and some sausage rolls. As she handed him the food, she turned to leave, but his voice stopped her cold. "I know you're in debt and devastated about your situation, but I have a remedy to your problems." Esther spun around, her heart racing. How could this stranger know about her private struggles? Who was this old man? The beggar reached into his worn coat pocket and produced a small, ornate bottle containing a liquid that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. The substance inside swirled hypnotically, catching the dim streetlight and refracting it in impossible ways. "Here," he said, pressing the bottle into her shocked hands. "Sprinkle this on your cake and pastry mixture before baking, and watch the magic unfold. But be careful with the amount you sprinkle." His dark, ancient eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that made her blood run cold. "And beware, nothing comes for free." Before Esther could ask any questions, the old man stood up with surprising agility and walked away into the shadows, leaving her standing alone in the dim light, clutching the mysterious bottle that would change everything. "Be warned," his voice echoed back to her from the darkness, "nothing comes for free." As Esther stared at the bottle in her trembling hands, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just crossed a threshold from which there would be no return. The liquid inside seemed to pulse with a life of its own, promising solutions to all her problems, but at what cost? The weight of her debts, the memory of Sister Agnes's faith in her, and the mysterious beggar's warning all swirled in her mind as she finally made her way home, the bottle hidden deep in her bag, its presence seeming to burn against her hip with each step. What Esther didn't know was that this moment would mark the beginning of her transformation from a struggling, honest baker into something far more sinister, something that would bring her everything she had ever dreamed of, and take away everything that truly mattered. For 3 days, the bottle sat hidden in Esther's small apartment, tucked away in her dresser drawer like a guilty secret. Every time she looked at it, the old man's warning echoed in her mind, "Nothing comes for free." But as her debts mounted and the final notices piled up, desperation began to override caution. On the 4th morning, facing yet another day of empty shelves and disappointed creditors, Esther made her decision. With trembling hands, she added just 3 drops of the mysterious liquid to her cake batter. The liquid dissolved instantly, leaving no trace except for a barely perceptible shimmer in the mixture. The transformation was immediate and terrifying. As the cakes baked, an aroma unlike anything she had ever created filled the bakery. It was intoxicating, almost hypnotic, a scent that seemed to bypass the nose and speak directly to the soul. Within minutes, people began gathering outside her shop, drawn by an irresistible urge they couldn't explain. That first day, she sold out completely. Customers raved about the taste, describing it as heavenly and addictive. They bought dozens of cakes to take home, and many returned the same day for more. Word spread like wildfire through Abuja's social circles. But that night, as Esther counted her earnings with joy, she noticed something disturbing. The customers who had eaten her cakes that day looked different. Their eyes held a strange, vacant quality, and they moved with an almost zombie-like determination toward her bakery. She dismissed it as coincidence, but the image haunted her dreams. Within weeks, Esther's bakery had become the most popular destination in Abuja. Politicians, celebrities, and wealthy businesspeople flocked to taste her creations. She was able to pay off her debts and expand to 3 locations across the city. Local newspapers featured her on their front pages, calling her a miracle baker and the sweetest success story in Nigeria. But the changes in her customers became impossible to ignore. They arrived each morning with desperate expressions, some shaking and sweating like drug addicts in withdrawal. They spoke in hushed tones about how they needed her cakes, how nothing else satisfied them anymore. Families began breaking apart as breadwinners spent their entire salaries on Esther's pastries. Dr. Adebayo, a local physician, was among the first to notice the pattern. Dozens of his patients had stopped eating regular food altogether, surviving solely on Esther's baked goods. They lost weight rapidly, their skin taking on a pale, almost translucent quality. When he tried to warn them, they became violent, accusing him of trying to keep them from their happiness. The doctor attempted to analyze samples of Esther's cakes, but the mysterious ingredient seemed to evade all scientific detection. Whatever was in that liquid, it wasn't of this world. As her empire grew, Esther began to change as well. The kind, humble girl who had once given her dinner to a beggar became cold and calculating. She raised her prices exponentially, knowing her customers would pay anything for their fix. She watched with detached fascination as once successful businesspeople bankrupted themselves buying her products. Sister Agnes visited one evening, deeply troubled by what she had witnessed. "My child," she said, her voice heavy with concern, "what has happened to you? This isn't the girl I raised. Your customers look ill. What are you putting in your cakes?" Esther's eyes flashed with an anger that shocked them both. "I'm giving people exactly what they want," she snapped. "For the first time in my life, I'm successful. Isn't that what you wanted for me?" Sister Agnes recoiled at the venom in Esther's voice. "Not like this," she whispered. "Never like this." That night, the old beggar appeared again, materializing from the shadows outside Esther's flagship bakery. But now she could see him clearly. His eyes glowed with an unholy light, and his smile revealed teeth that seemed to be made of darkness itself. "Satisfied with your success?" he asked, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. "What did you do to me?" Esther demanded, though deep down she already knew the answer. "I gave you exactly what you asked for," he replied. "Success. Wealth. The love of the people. But every soul has a price, and you've been collecting payment in the most delicious way possible." The horrible truth crashed over her like a wave. The mysterious liquid wasn't just making her cakes irresistible, it was slowly draining the life force from everyone who consumed them. Each cake sold was a small piece of someone's soul, feeding both her success and something far more sinister. "You're feeding on them," she whispered in horror. "We're feeding on them," the demon corrected. "You're my partner now, Esther. Every bite they take binds them closer to us, makes them weaker, makes you stronger. Look around you, look at your empire built on their addiction." As the truth sank in, Esther began to see her customers with new eyes. They weren't just addicted to her cakes, they were slowly dying, their life force being siphoned away with each purchase. The pale, gaunt faces, the desperate expressions, the way they moved like shadows of their former selves, it was all connected to the mysterious liquid. She thought of Mrs. Olumide, who had been one of her first regular customers. The woman had once been a vibrant lawyer, but now she looked skeletal, her children constantly begging her to stop buying the cakes that were killing her. There was Mr. Emeka, a successful businessman who had lost his company because he couldn't stop spending money on her pastries. Dozens of others whose lives had been destroyed by their addiction to her supernatural confections. "I want to stop," Esther told the demon. "I want to reverse this." His laughter was like breaking glass. "Oh, my dear child, you can't stop now. You've tasted power, wealth, success. You've become addicted to their worship, their need for you. Besides," his eyes gleamed malevolently, "you've used almost all the liquid. Do you know what happens when you run out?" Esther's blood ran cold. "What happens?" "All those souls you've been collecting. They'll be claimed. Every person who has eaten your cakes will wither away within days. Hundreds of souls, all at once. Unless," he paused dramatically, "you agree to become my permanent partner. Serve me willingly, and I'll give you an endless supply of the liquid. Your customers will live, trapped in their addiction, but they'll live. Refuse, and watch them all die knowing it was your choice. Esther returned to her apartment that night, her mind reeling. The bottle sat on her kitchen counter, nearly empty now. She had perhaps enough for one more day's baking. Tomorrow, she would have to make a choice that would determine the fate of hundreds of innocent people. She thought of Sister Agnes, who had taught her that baking was like prayer, putting your heart into it and letting God do the rest. She thought of the children at the orphanage, who had looked up to her as their successful older sister. She thought of the woman she had been just months ago, struggling but honest, poor but good. Then she looked at her bank statements, her expensive clothes, her luxurious apartment. She thought of the respect she commanded, the way people looked at her with awe and admiration. She thought of the alternative, watching hundreds of people die because of her choice, becoming a mass murderer overnight. As dawn approached, Esther made her decision. The next morning, customers lined up outside all three of her bakeries as usual, their faces gaunt and desperate, their eyes pleading for their daily fix. Esther stood in her main kitchen, the nearly empty bottle in her hands, and made her final batch of cakes. But this time, she didn't add the mysterious liquid. Instead, she baked with the same love and care that Sister Agnes had taught her, putting her heart into every mixture, every fold of dough, every careful measurement. These would be her last honest cakes, free from supernatural influence. As the cakes baked, filling the kitchen with a pure, natural aroma, Esther wrote a letter. To whoever finds this. My name is Esther, and I was once called the best baker in Abuja. But my success came at a price I should never have paid. I made a deal with something evil, and innocent people have suffered because of my choices. I cannot undo the harm I have caused, but I can prevent it from continuing. If you are reading this, then I have chosen to break the chain. The people who ate my cakes will suffer withdrawal, but they will live. They will recover. They will be free. I pray that God will forgive me for what I have done. Tell Sister Agnes that I remembered her lessons in the end. Baking is like prayer. You put your heart into it, and God does the rest. Esther. She placed the letter on the counter, opened all the windows of her bakery, and waited for the demon to come. When the demon appeared, his rage was terrible to behold. You foolish girl, he screamed. You have no idea what you've done. But Esther stood firm, though her body trembled with fear. I know exactly what I've done, she said. I've chosen to be the person Sister Agnes raised me to be. The demon's form began to shift and expand, revealing his true, horrifying nature. You will pay for this betrayal with your life. I know, Esther replied calmly, but they will live. And that's enough. As the demon reached for her, Esther's last thought was of Sister Agnes's gentle hands guiding hers as they kneaded dough together, and the warmth of the kitchen where she had first learned that baking was an act of love. The next morning, customers found Esther's bakeries empty, with only the smell of honest bread lingering in the air. Over the following weeks, those who had been addicted to her supernatural cakes slowly recovered. They suffered withdrawal symptoms, but gradually, their natural appetites returned, their skin regained its color, and their eyes cleared of the vacant hunger that had possessed them. Sister Agnes found the letter and wept for the girl she had raised, understanding finally that Esther had found her way back to the light, even if it cost her everything. The three bakeries remained empty for months, until the city eventually sold them to new owners. And in the Catholic orphanage in Garki, Sister Agnes continued to teach the children how to bake, always emphasizing that the most important ingredient was love, and that some prices were too high to pay, no matter how desperate you might be. The evil cake baker's story became a cautionary tale whispered in the markets of Abuja, a reminder that success built on darkness can never truly satisfy, and that sometimes the greatest courage is found in choosing to lose everything rather than losing yourself. Hope you learnt something from this story. Please join our cheap membership on YouTube. Your support means a lot to us. And do well to subscribe, like, comment and share.